Oh, it's been a while since we've done one of these, but you know what? It's time to get back into the world of Marvel Comics. I have done a few videos where I've recommended where do you start reading Moon Knight? Where do you start reading Hawkeye? Well, today we're headed into the swamps of the Marvel Universe and entering into the Nexus Point because we are talking about the creature who, if you touch him, he burns fear into you. It is Man-Thing. We're talking Man-Thing. We're going to give you some recommendations today for how to start reading Man-Thing. Where do you begin? What do you do with this character? It's an interesting one. Is there a particular reason I wanted to do Man-Thing today? Well, it might be that this character could be growing in popularity based solely upon his appearance in an upcoming Marvel Studios presentation special presentation. And honestly, I've always had a fascination with Man-Thing, and I'll be making giant-sized Man-Thing jokes all day, don't you worry. If you want to come back to this channel and listen to anything else I have to say about a Man-Thing, I will be talking Man-Thing jokes until the day is dark. I like the idea of Man-Thing. The character is so fun, the character is so original, and as I went through the list of what books I want to recommend to people, I did notice a very interesting theme that went throughout Man-Thing. And that is, most of these books are insane. There is just so much randomness that comes from a character like this that it's almost impossible to explain. It goes into so many weird areas and explores so many of these interesting and insane themes that you don't really get a full picture of what this character could represent. So when I talked about Moon Knight and Hawkeye, I was like, yeah, here's the arc of the character. This is where Moon Knight starts, this is where he goes, this is where Clint starts, this is where he goes. When it comes to Man-Thing, it's just like, how weird does the writer want to get? How weird is the artwork going to let it become? And what else are we going to talk about with this character? So, I have a couple books we're going to talk about. Again, this is not every iteration of the character. There's going to be a couple mini-series or arcs I keep out in certain eras and things, so if you want to check those out, you can. This is just an overarching idea of books you can read, both contemporary and modern, to get a sense of what the character is and should be. So first off, let's jump into the world of Astonishing Tales / Adventures into Fear. This is, of course, where the character premiered in this anthology book where it's short stories introducing this character. Look at how weird and bizarre we can get. There's not much to this era. It's more just we have a swamp creature. He's kind of silly. He kind of represents a bigger picture for the Marvel Universe, but you don't really get that until later. You have to bring this up because it is the starting ground. It's not the most important part of the character, but it's one thing I want to make people aware of, hey, these classic, Astonishing Tales books, they're really fun. And Adventures into Fear, it's kind of that thing you don't see much in, the big two companies anymore, of just these horror stories. We have this generic title, anything can fit under this umbrella, we don't have to worry too much about what it's going to be, you got the picture, you understand what's being said, we can move past it and move on to other stuff. That's what that is, and it's just kind of a fun area to start. The character doesn't get a lot of play, but it introduces the world to Man-Thing, and once the world gets a hold of a Man-Thing, they don't want to let go of that Man-Thing. A lot of those coming, don't worry. So the next part of this, I'm kind of grouping a bunch of things together. The first thing we're going to be grouping together is Volume 1 of Man-Thing. And one thing I want to make very apparent as we're going into this is that Steve Gerber is probably the father of what this character should be. And it starts with Man-Thing Volume 1. It's 22 issues long. It is just, I don't want to say insanity, but it is just this controlled idea of this kind of effortless creature who protects all of reality, seeing different interpretations of reality. You meet some very fascinating and crazy characters along the way in that book, including Howard the Duck, including Korak the Barbarian. You meet these very integral characters to the Marvel mythos in this weird book about this guy that protects the universe in a swamp. It is well drawn, it is well executed, and again, there's a stoicism to the Man-Thing character where it's this neutral entity that is just well, I'm doing this now, I guess. I don't really know how to explain it, but I'm going over here. I'm a part of this world. This is where I am. Steve Gerber is the guy who said this is what we're doing with this character. This is what he represents. He's a monster. He's a Man-Thing. He's going to go do that. He's going to go do this. It's very much this weird kind of comedy horror book, which is a great balance of the two, kind of going into all these different ways. And Gerber had his hands on this character for a long time. So he did volume 1 of the Man-Thing. There's also Giant Size Man-Thing, which is just extended issues of the book. And yes, it is called that. Marvel Comics literally published a book called Giant Sized Man-Thing. It was essentially like the annuals or just larger books, and it's very fun. Those are two eras of this character that I think are the most prominent, and where the creator was like, oh, we're doing something fun with this. I'm not doing Swamp Thing. Y'all can shut up. I'm going to do something weird. He's going to talk to a weird duck guy. And that happened. So that era is probably the most iconic and most important. The people always get confused for like more Swamp Thing elements for that character. But when you look at what the first Man-Thing stories were, that's what that was in particular. And then later on in like 2012, there was kind of like the secret files released of the old Steve Gerber scripts that never really got made, and in a mini series called Infernal Man-Thing, and it's a really good book. It's kind of fun, kind of different, just show you like this guy, Steve, really knew what he wanted to do with Man-Thing, and he did that into some fun, creative endeavors that are worth checking out. I like that era. You move over from 74, which is like the pinnacle of Gerber doing Man-Thing, does that for a couple years. Then we get volume 2, starting in 79. And it is kind of like in that era where we're switching over from like the 70s comics to what the 80s are going to be. We're kind of right in that bubble where there's going to be not the burst, but it's going to be like, okay, now things are kind of becoming more mature, more informed in certain aspects. Man-Thing was just a story that existed. It didn't have much cultural staying power. The first one was like craziness ensues. The second volume is just like, yeah, this is fine. This is kind of a nice topic we could explore. There's not much going on here, but it's an interesting staying place. It lasted about 10 to 11 issues. Claremont wrote it for a bit. It is fine. It doesn't have the same impact, but it was just kind of like, oh, people still are clamoring for a Man-Thing. Let's put a Man-Thing in their hands. Now, here's the thing that's going to happen that people are like, wait, you're missing a couple. No, I'm not. We're going to be jumping pretty far into the future. So these first few books were all in the 70s. We're going to be jumping to the 2000s because the thing is, this is still a minor character in the Marvel mythos. You can ask anybody who's not a comic fan, maybe they know Man-Thing. But Man-Thing is less popular than half of the characters. It is a minute character that not a lot of people know. So he makes appearances here and there, you know, but where he really starts to kind of make his prominence again is when Marvel's like, well, we actually can kind of do these more mature books. So he actually gets a couple like maxi series in like the Marvel Max line. The one I want to talk about though is Dead of Night featuring Man-Thing, because it's just weird. It kind of goes back to like that initial horror route for this character, where it's like, oh, he's appearing in this horror anthology. And Dead of Night was a comic book Marvel published earlier on, where it's like, look at these monsters and creatures of the darkness and this deathly identity. So let's put Man-Thing back in there. Marvel Max is like a weird era where they have like some good characters that come out of it. They have some good ideas that come out of it. More often than not, there's like just generic whatever's in there. But Dead of Night, a really fun concept to re-explore and bring back into prominence, having the Man-Thing be connected to that story is a good idea. It gives him something to do. He also had another Marvel Max series in there that you could check out. It was fine. The thing is, like, other characters we have looked at in this kind of lineage are characters who have staying power and cultural relevance. They could have all these different updates. Man-Thing, again, it's so stoic and simplistic where it feels like you're either going to go too Swamp Thing in like this deranged body horror identity connection to like the swamp, this mystical energy, or it's like doop-de-doop reality's breaking apart. What if we just do this crazy shit? That's pretty much what we're getting there. And up until that point, that's kind of what Man-Thing was. There was never really like anybody else trying to do anything with the character. There was like, you know, maybe he appears in like the Thunderbolts book, because what else are we doing with him? Maybe he appears in like the Ultimates lineup of Marvel Ultimate doing something there. Not really though. There's nothing really impactful going on with this character. Believe it or not, Man-Thing did have a movie, and I guess we should put that into where to start with the character. It is a simplistic idea. The movie isn't perfect, but it is something you could do to get that character in there. But we're here to recommend comic books to you. So Dead of Night featuring Man-Thing. It's kind of fun. The artwork is really weird, and it's that beautiful kind of weird that I really enjoy. I think it's kind of cool. Then again, another big break because there's not much in there. In that time when you have Infernal Man-Thing, which again is Steve Gerber's story coming together, but I'm going to put all the Gerber stuff together so you get that picture. Then I say the next big impact that this character has is 2017's Man-Thing Story, written by R.L. Stine. Now, you don't know R.L. Stine. He is one of the legendary authors of the Goosebumps series of books. And he's like, I'm going to conquer the comic book world. And he tried to do that with Swamp Thing. Now, the thing about this Swamp Thing is, like I said, of every other iteration of the character, we are taking some big swings and taking some big chances and going into some insane directions. This one does the same. It's almost like a Hollywood story. And you're like, whoa, that's kind of weird. But it's interesting to see R.L. Stine's name attached to this because it does feel like a character they would play with. And I really like seeing that aspect. But sometimes the story beats like, that's kind of strange. I don't think that's great, but I don't hate what I'm seeing either. And that's kind of fun. This book, it looks good. It is well written. It's just like kind of an out there story for this character in a character who's based in out there stories. It's kind of compelling, though, I gotta say. Not the best book that Man-Thing has been in, but it's one that I say, if you're looking for like, oh, you like the author, you want to see an outside book in the Marvel Universe, R.L. Stine's Man-Thing is the place to go. You know, if there's any Man-Thing I'd like to touch, it's R.L. Stine's. I'm sorry. I'll keep doing those forever. And that's kind of like all the modern contemporary stuff. But then we have another book this year to celebrate the 50th anniversary. Can you imagine 50 years of Man-Thing? And this is all we got to show for it. A couple of good series, none of them lasting too long ever. But then you have this miniseries that came out this year from writer Steve Orlando that I really enjoyed, and I did reviews on it on this channel called Curse of the Man-Thing. If you want to see a Man-Thing-led story taking place in the larger Marvel Universe, this is the place to go. He teams up with Spider-Man, the Avengers, and the X-Men in this really fun story that plays into all of his themes of like this Nexus of Realities kind of character, this swamp-based character, and other mutated people within the Marvel Universe. It's very compelling, well drawn, and perfectly executed. And that is the legacy and the history and every book you should get involved with for Man-Thing. Not everyone is what I talked about, but these are the key ones. Steve Gerber holding on to the character for a long time in his first volume, in his giant-sized Man-Thing, and his Infernal Man-Thing. Check out the Astonishing Tales and Adventures into Fear, which give you an introduction to this character. You have Volume 2, which is 11 issues of pretty decent stuff that doesn't go too far. Jump a couple decades to Dead of Night featuring Man-Thing. See this character in the horrific maxi series that's kind of just whatever, but it is beautiful to look at, and this kind of gothic tragedy, which is kind of fun to see. R.L. Stine got his grubby little hands all over this character and made it just weird, just really weird and fun, and a compelling book. And then Curse of the Man-Thing, to celebrate all 50 years of that insanity, you have this book where he helps the Marvel Universe. This character, it's a hard one to get into, and it's kind of one of those like very comic booky things where you're like, okay, so in the Marvel Universe, you go to like the Everglades, there's this guy that lives in the swamp, and if he touches you, it's because you know fear, and those who feel fear burn at the Man-Thing's touch, and he burns you. But he's also like the protector of all like the realities. He's at like the nexus point of everything where he can see all these things and he has to protect it from happening. It is a lot to deal with if you are just like a random person who doesn't know what to do. But if you are somebody who is interested in comic books and you're like, this character might be becoming a bigger deal than they've ever been before, and you want to see where to start, well, your favorite character of the swamp, this is where you go. If you want my honest opinion, and that's what you're here for, these are all worth reading, but Man-Thing Volume 1 from Steve Gerber and all of the Steve Gerber stuff are the best this character has ever been written. So that's what you should do. And that is your guide to reading Man-Thing. Get it in your hands, hold some Man-Thing, and check out what you're going to do with it next. Now, thank you guys for watching this video. I might be back again sooner than later to talk another one of these guides to reading comic book characters, but we'll see what happens. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.